We're talking today with Mr. Howard Terry of Naples, Florida. The interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. All right, now Mr. Terry, if you will, start by telling us a little bit about your family background.
Right out of my eyes.
Yeah. To begin with, where were you born, for instance?
Vanderbilt Hospital, Nashville, Tennessee.
Okay, and what year?
1927.
All right. Now, what did your family do for a living at that time?
My father was retired from the city of Nashville. My father was born in 1853. He was 12 years old, and he fought in the Civil War. He was conscripted and fought in the Civil War, the last year of the Civil War. Mm-hmm. He was retired from Nashville as a street sweeper and a lamplighter. That's why I'm very, I like that song, The Old Lamplighter, because it reminds me of my dad. My mother didn't know any of her parents. She was when I say an orphan, I mean she didn't know, she had absolutely no relatives whatsoever. She was, in 1900 she was born, in East Tennessee, somewhere in East Tennessee. Mm-hmm. And because she was called illegitimate, there's no such thing as an illegitimate child, they're all legitimate. But anyway, she was called illegitimate. And so it was such a shame on somebody, somewhere along the line, that they put her in the Tennessee Industrial School in Nashville. And she was there until she was old enough to get to leave, and she met my father, who was, I think, about 48 years old then. I'd have to go back and check that, but he was in his middle or late 40s, mm-hmm. And she married him, and he had 2 daughters and 2 sons. He had been married twice before, and both wives had died. And one of my half-brothers was killed in World War I on Armistice Day, and I don't know what happened to the other. Mm-hmm. His 2 daughters, I know something about them. Maggie was one's name, and Myrtle was the other. And I have contact with Maggie's. I think it's Maggie's son, who is my nephew, and he's as old as I am, or older. I think he's as old as I am. Mm-hmm. But anyway, my father, I didn't know this until my sister, who died of cancer a couple of years back, she told me, my mother, and I'm the only one left in the family. I only had a sister, and I knew none of my half relatives, and I knew very little of my sister because I was put in an orphan's home when I was about 2 and a half. Mm-hmm. I was put in the Protestant orphanage in Nashville, and I remember my father coming to see me the last time that I saw him alive. And the only time I can remember seeing him, he come to see me from the poorhouse. My mother had put him in the poorhouse, and after she had taken all his money, and he come to see me, and he had a brown paper sack, and in that sack he had an orange and an apple, and he gave me that orange and apple. There's no way I could forget that. I was 5 years old at the time, and I think he was about 78. This was in 1932. Mm-hmm. He left, and that was the last time I seen him alive. The next time I seen him, he was laying in a casket in the graveyard, and I walked up to him to the casket. I was 5 years old, and I asked him why he was laying there. Why didn't he get up? And I kept trying to get him to talk to me. I remember that, you see. Mm-hmm. And pretty soon, my mother was there, and I think my 2 half-sisters was there, as I recall. Anyway, the powers that be took me back to the Protestant orphanage at that time, and I remember I was extremely lonely. When my mother left me there, I can remember hanging on to her, and I tore her dress hanging on to her. Well, after she left, they beat crap out of me for tearing her dress. But anyway, little things like that I can remember. But anyway, when I got to be about 6, they considered me too old for their Protestant orphanage, so they sent me to one of their parent orphanages, which was called John W. Thomas Fresh Air Camp. And at that time, it was run by a man named E.C. Hauser. And later, for some reason, when he left, a man took over by the name of Mr. Thornberry. I never knew his first name. But, during that place, they worked us like we were grown people. We had to cut all of our own firewood. We cut trees down that were 2 or 3 feet in diameter for wood. We cut walnut trees, we cut oak trees, mostly oak trees, and we had to cut up our own firewood and split our. Now I'm talking about kids that were 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, and one time, Mr. Thornberry, some kid that they had put there, he was a street smart kid. I think he was about 10, and he smoked, and he smoked a cigarette, and they found the cigarette butt in any case, and nobody knew who did it, and he wouldn't own up to it, and so Mr. Thornberg took 12 of us that he thought would be the one that did it. Late one afternoon, and he lined us up on the veranda, the back porch of the main building in this Protestant in this fresh air camp, and he gave each one of us a wash basin. He went to town, went to Nashville, and he bought back a box of King Edward cigars. I can remember the name. And he put a cigar in each one of our mouths, and he lit each one, and he would go to each kid and make us inhale each draw. Well, he knew what would happen, you know. It's why he gave us those pan. And you never seen the like of sick of kids in your life. Some of the kids even passed out. They got so sick, heaving and stuff. And I remember the next morning when I went down by the creek. There was a creek that run through the back of the place. And I went down there and I looked, and that creek was just full of puke, full of the kids that were there. He had dumped their yeah, and but that never stopped anybody from smoking. Later at Tennessee Industrial School, that's another thing we called SHIT. Paper ducks. We rolled them in toilet paper. We would pick up tobacco with a straw. We'd wet the end of the straw, and these officers always told to tear up their cigarette butts and throw them, you know. Well, we go around and pick up them grains of tobacco, and it took us a long time, but we'd get enough to roll into a piece of toilet paper. Well, we had no matches, but we was pretty smart. We'd take the plate off of a light switch, and we'd take a pencil that we had, that school pencil, lead pencil, we'd break it in two, and we'd touch the two ends, see, and we'd take a piece of paper, and when that carbon hit, see, it would spark, yeah. and we'd light that paper, and we'd light our SPD, we called them. Mm-hmm. And So then we'd put the plate back on, and nobody the wiser, see. And we had one pencil. They counted the pencils all the time in school, but we kept one out and when it would finally burn out, we'd get another one, you know, because eventually they would burn. The wood would finally burn up, you know. But that's why we used paper to light it instead of leaving the wood burn, you know, because we wanted to save that. But anyway, but they on the farm line, they had what they called. It was a different place when I was there as it was later. After 1942, 3, 4, 5, whenever it was, they changed it. They didn't work the kids the way they worked us because it was against the law what they were doing. They had child labor law then, but they paid no. The state of Tennessee paid no attention to that. But anyway, they had what we called the farm line, and the laundry line, the brick line, and there was a couple other lines that I can't recall right now, but those, the farm line and the laundry line were the worst because I remember Joe Seals ran the laundry at that time. Later, I think he changed and got something else, but at that time, and they had mangles in there. See, we had 400 kids there or more. And they had great big regular laundry. It was a regular big laundry, like a
commercial laundry.
Yeah, commercial laundry. And they had these mangles, and they had 2 of these big mangles, and they would run the sheets after they come out of the washer. They would run these sheets, and they had three long strings over these mangles to keep them from rolling over again and tearing up the sheets. And they would still roll over and tear them if you didn't catch them. Well, when those sheets come out, they were extremely hot. They weren't just warm. Some of them even was brown when they come out, nearly a light brown. They would be so hot. And we had a gallon can of a kid on one side and a kid on the other side, and that caught them. They had 2 kids feeding too from the other end, but. The kids on this side was the worst job, and they had a gallon can on each side, and you had to keep dipping your hands in that water. If you didn't, you'd have blisters all over your hands. We'd catch them as they come out, because if you didn't, they would go back again and tear it up, and then you got the hell beat out of you. I mean, you talk about corporal punishment. Hell, corporal punishment, I don't know what, I was beaten with a belt one time, not a belt you wear. The belt was about 2 or 3 inches in width, and it must have been at least a half an inch thick or a quarter of an inch thick at least. And a guy named Spider Webb beat me with that belt, and that's another story. But let me get back. When these sheets come out, you had to grab them and fold them like that, see, and you had to hold them, and they were hot, so you had to keep dipping your hands in that water to keep from burning blisters on your hands. And I hated that job. But, and on the farm line, we had one of the officers, Bobby Moran, he had a little pad with him, and we had no shoes and no hat on our head, and the Tennessee sun was hot. And he would go down a bean row, the field of beans, bush beans, and string bean, bush beans, and he would look down the row, and he'd write on that pad how many hampers or bushels of beans that we were to get off of each row. They were long rows, big field, and if you didn't get that many beans off of there, he carried a swagger stick, and he'd whap you good across the rear end with that stick if you didn't get that many beans off. So we weren't all that. Those kids you get smart, you know. When you get crap beat out of you a lot, you're going to get smart. So we'd catch him not looking. We'd pull up a bean vine here or there, so where he couldn't see it, notice it, and we'd put him on the bottom of that hamper. So that bean, when we got to the end of the row, it'd be full. Well, he never knew that, and we sent when the beans got to the cannery, they canned them in big gallon cans, and at that time they brought girls down from the girls department to do the canning, and it was hot. It was miserable for them. But anyway, they would can the vines and all. Hell, they wasn't going to rat on us. They was on our side, and they knew what the score was. So and I don't know if I don't know this for a fact, but what I think the reason I think is because we never got very much of that stuff that we farmed. So it's my opinion now. It's just my opinion that they were selling that damn stuff to people, but they wouldn't. The people that got it that had the vines, they knew damn well they better not say nothing because they was breaking the law too. You see. Now, like I say, I have no proof of that.
So what was supposed to happen to the food that you canned? Was that
We
supposed
were
to be...
supposed to get everything we produced for ourselves.
Okay.
When we made sauerkraut, in the basement of the main building, and on the if you're facing the building, it would be the left wing in the basement. We made sauerkraut, and we made it in those big whiskey barrels, wooden whiskey barrels. Type of barrels, I don't know if they were whiskey barrels, but they were that big and that size, and we'd do about a dozen of those, at a time. We raised our own cabbage. We cut it up, and we tempered it. You'd put water and salt in, and then we had to take a tamper and bruise the cabbage real good. Pour salt, layer by layer until it was full. Then we'd put a cheesecloth across the top of the barrel and let it ferment there for 2 or 3 months before we would start to eat it. But I never got very much sauerkraut. I always wondered what the hell happened to that sauerkraut. I still wonder what happened to it, but I don't know. But anyway, there were times like one time we had on Saturday and Sunday nights, we had what they called handouts. And we would line up on one side of the mess hall by divisions, 4th Division, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th Division. And the 5th Division was an outside. Those outside divisions, by the way, were much, much lenient. They were much better. I believe, now I don't know this to be a fact either, but I believe that they thought the kids on the backyard, that we were locked up on the backyard. We never seen a blade of grass until Sunday or until we went out working on a detail. But it was cinders. It was all cinders and clinkers from our furnace. They had a great big furnace. As a matter of fact, they had 4 big stokers in that furnace that ran the coal. But anyway, and so they would take those cinders and clinkers and put that on the backyard so there wouldn't be any mud, you see. Well, we had no shoes in the summer. They took our shoes away in April or May, and they didn't give them back to us until late October or November before we got them back again. And our feet, by the time we got them back, our feet was like leather, and at first, your feet, you would get cut. Your feet would get cut. You'd stub your toes, and your feet would get cut on those clinkers and cinders. We played tackle football as a kid. We'd take a sock. I'd get a sock from Mrs. Bonney. Now she was a precious soul. I was in the 4th Division, and she was in charge of the 4th Division, and she was never mean to us. Never. That woman was a saint. She was my mother, really. In reality, that's what happened. I considered her my mother. And I got a sock from her, and I filled it with the cinders and stuff, and tied it, and that was our football. We would kick that, and we would throw it, passing, but it was always tackle. We didn't go any touch football at all. We tackled each other on on those clinkers and stuff, and we got cut up, you know, but we didn't, we were tough kids. We really and truly were tough kids. And we had fist fights like you would have somebody, there had to be a dominant one, you know. And I was pretty well dominant. They called me, my name was Shotgun, Little Shotgun, because I was always fighting, you know. And but anyway, Mrs. Bonnie she was an extremely nice person. And our third grade teacher, Mrs. Wagner, she was another wonderful person.
Did they have a school right there on the premises?
Oh yeah. You and you weren't allowed off of that backyard. The people on the backyard, the kids on the backyard, I think it was the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th Division on the backyard, and you weren't allowed off of that backyard nowhere, no way. Only on Sunday. On Sunday they let you go, what they call going on the lawn back then. And when we went on the lawn, I can remember there was a tree stump right near the main building, pretty close to the main building, but still on the lawn, right by the drive off of Foster Avenue. And I remember sitting on that every Sunday. Every Sunday I'd sit there and wait for my mother to come see me. And she never did. I think the whole time I was there, I seen her maybe once. And I remember getting up when they took us back to the backyard. I remember getting up crying, and it was a terrible feeling. It was a terrible feeling. Hell, they put me in there when I was 10 years old. Well, all during the age of 11 and 12, I seen her maybe once or most twice. And I can remember getting off of that stump when I was 10 and 11, and going back to the backyard, and I can remember crying, and it was a terrible, lonely feeling, you know. But I would get over it, and but anyway, this is all in my book. I've written it, but this was this one time we lined up to go through the mess hall. It was on a Sunday night, and to get our handouts. And our handouts was a little brown paper sack, and in that always, it was never any different. We had a pimento cheese sandwich, and they made it themselves out of that real sharp cheddar cheese, and it wasn't hardly fit to eat. Yeah, I mean, it was hard to eat. You had to be really hungry to eat that. And we had 4 peanut butter crackers. That is to say, in those days, the box came with four crackers on each side. Well, they had peanut butter, homemade peanut butter that they made, and then they had an orange or an apple in that. Now that was our supper Sunday nights, and so this one Sunday night, I got my hand out. Now I went through the other door. You went in one door and went out the other. And as I went by the steam house, what we called a steam house, there was a kid standing upon it. It was a lean-to concrete house off of the mess hall that steam pipes valves was in. It had a little door there where you go in, you could turn the steam on and off, and that supplied the steam for all the whole place, the main building and that the 4th Division, everywhere. But anyway, as I walked by, this kid he was always kind of tormenting me a little bit, and nothing serious, but he said, "Hey, Shotgun, bet you can't hit me with that cheese sandwich." So I took it apart, you know, and he was standing in front of the window, the mess hall window, see, because it was that high, and I threw it at him like that, and he stepped aside and it stuck to the screen, you know. Now that screen was a rusty old screen, and it was full of fly poop. I mean, it was the filthiest thing you could ever get a hold of. And he stepped aside, and the bread fell. See, but the pimento cheese stuck there. So I threw the other one at him, and he stepped this way, and same thing. So I didn't think anything of it, see, because hardly any of them would eat that pimento cheese sandwich anyway. But anyway, I went on down to the alcove, what we called the alcove, which was the entrance to the school building on the backyard, and a kid was smoking an SPD, so we'd pass it around, you know. And pretty soon a kid come running down and he said, "Shotgun, shotgun, Spider Webb wants to see you in the mess hall." So I wondered, what did he want to see me for? So I went up there, you know, and some other kids was looking in the windows, you know, they was watching. And I went in the mess hall, and he said, "Shotgun, did you put that pimento cheese on that screen?" I told him what happened, you know. And he said, "I seen he had this big leather strap, you know, and I knew idea what he was going to do." So he said, "I want you to drop your uniform." We had, in those days, we had uniforms. They were coveralls, just regular coveralls. And so I dropped my coveralls, and he said, "Now bend over that chair." So I bent over the chair, and there with my bare butt, you know, and he took that strap and he beat the crap right out of me with that strap. And then he said to me, he said, "Now I want you to go out there and I want you to lick every bit of that pimento cheese. I don't want to see a bit of that pimento cheese on that screen." So I went out there and I licked that screen. Now I'm telling you how I didn't die from that. I don't know, but I didn't. I licked it off. It was the filthiest, dirtiest damn screen, rusted, and flies had crapped on it for 100 years, I think. Well, and so I did that, you know, and I think it was about 3 days before I could sit down or before I could lay on my back, because it hurt so damn bad.
Now, how long did you have to stay at this place? You said you got to this place when you were 10.
I was there 5 years.
Okay.
I was there from 1937 to 1942, when I talked my mother into signing for me to go to war.
All right.
She was willing to do it if I would pay her $30 a month of my $50 a month pay that I was going to get as a private.
Right.
In the Marine Corps. I would get $50 a month. She said, "If you'll make me out an allotment for $30 a month, I'll sign for you." She didn't give a damn, and I made an insurance policy out to her for $5,000. It was either 5 or 10. You could take either way. I just picked 5 because hell, I only had $20 left, you know. So you would think that a mother with a war raging, and by the way, we were losing it then. We weren't winning. And you'd think that she wouldn't want her son to go off to no damn war, especially 15 years old, you know? Well, like I say, I didn't have the family that somebody would have. I never knew my family at all.
How did you manage to arrange it? How did you contact her, or how did you come up with the idea of joining the Marines? Tell me a little bit about how that came about.
Well, first, I ran away from the place first. I went down to the recruiting station. And I told the sergeant that I was 17. And he looked at me and he said, "You're no 17 years old. Who do you think you're trying to kid?" He said, "Besides, if you were 17, you'd have to have your mother sign for you." He knew what he was saying.
Right.
See? And so I said, "Oh, okay." So I took off back to the school and snuck back in on the backyard. Now, how I got in and out of there was another thing 2. Right behind the big, they had a fire escape in the back of the main building was across the front, and then it had 2 wings, one wing going back on each side. It was a big main building, and it was 3 stories high. And behind the fire escape, right by the back door, as you went all the way through the main building, straight through, there was a door to the backyard. Well, the big round fire escape was right beside that, and behind that there was a grating, a cast iron grating for crawl space under the floor. So I took that crawl space off, and I crawled under that floor looking for a place to get out. Now it was only 18 inches, and it was extremely, the dirt under that building hadn't seen a drop of water for 100 years, and it was dusty as you can get. You had to hold your breath, really, before you could get out. And it took me several turns, several times, to find a place. I finally found where the foundation had been chipped away for some reason or other, and there was I could get through there to get to the other ventilating grating. And when I did, that grating come out pretty easy, and I kicked that, and it was behind some bushes that was along the front of the building, and so that's how I got in and out, you know. And and it was hairy. You had to hold your breath pretty near it all the way because you couldn't breathe. That dust was so bad, but it was worth it. Anyway, I got back to my place on the backyard, and I ran away again. And my mother only lived about 1.5 miles, maybe 2 miles. She lived right near the fairgrounds, Tennessee State Fairgrounds in Nashville. And that's pretty close to TIS, Tennessee Industrial School. And I ran away, and I saw her. Now this was when I was 15 years old then, you see. It was in March when on my birthday, March the 13th, when I turned 15, that I went down there. Well, in July, I went back. I ran away from the place, only temporarily though. I'd done that, and this is in my book too. I'd run away to see her a time or two once I got to be 14, see? And I took a kid with me. We called him One-Eye. He had one eye, and he had a stiff hip. He had to shuffle, and he only had one eye, and he was skinny, you know, he was small. And he was an extremely good friend. I loved him dearly, and I'd fight for him all the time because all the other kids wanted to bully him, you know. By the way, I get ahead of myself here. I want to tell you about the food, but first let me finish this other. One-Eye. Him and I, but anyway, my mother, I went and I told her, see, when I got home that day, I said, if you'll sign for me, I'll make an allotment out for you for $30 a month if you'll tell them that I'm 17. Oh, she was all for that, see? So come July the 15th, we went down. And the guy, he recognized me, he knew it. And he said to my mother, he said to me, how old are you? And I said, 17. And he looked at my mother, and he said, are you sure this boy's 17? And my mother, if you knew her, she was, she took no crap off of nobody. And she said, you heard what I said. He's 17 or I wouldn't be here. You know, or words to that effect.
Right.
And so he shoved the papers out there for her to sign and for me to sign. And he said, do you want to be a regular or reserve? You want to be in the reserves or you want to be a regular? Hell, I didn't know any difference. I said, I just want to be a regular Marine. You know, okay. He said 4 years. See, that meant I would go 4 years at least. None of that duration plus 6.
Right.
But anyway, so she signed, and they swore me in. I went back home to the next day. I went to Union Station, and they shipped me down to Parris Island, South Carolina, by way of Yamasee. We got off the train in Yamasee, and they trucked us in from Yamasee.
All right.
I thought I'd get to see a boat, or I'd get to see the ocean. I'd never done that, see? I didn't get to see none of that. But anyway, going through boot camp.
Yeah, you said you were going to talk about the food back at the...
Oh yeah, okay. When a new kid would arrive at the institution, we would eventually he would see a cockroach or a cockroach leg or maybe a mouse's leg or something in his oatmeal. It's almost always in breakfast. And they would always say, oh, you know, look what's in my... The kids next to him would say, never mind that. After you're here a week or two, you'll see a whole one. See what would happen? The cockroaches and the vermin would run up the wall and start across the ceiling. Well, when that hot steam hit them on that ceiling, they'd drop right in that damned oatmeal, you know. And that happened very often. And we told him, that's good. You're getting a lot of protein in that oatmeal. In that oatmeal. But after a while, we had another kid there that this isn't in the book. It probably should be. And I can't remember his name. It started with an H though. Anyway, a new kid would come, and you know they put only so much food on the table, and when that was gone, there wasn't no more. And if you wasn't willing to fight, you got shorted. Well, anyway, a new kid would come, and this kid always wanted to sit by a new kid, see? And he'd sit there, and when you filed into the mess hall, you stood behind your chair with your arms up like this, and Spider Webb would holler, I don't even know his first name, but Spider Webb would holler, seats. And boy, big noise because it's cement and there's a lot of chairs, and they would sit down. Well, this kid always liked to be next to one of them kids, see, and he would just about the kid would get his plate, you know, then he would put some on his plate and he would draw up a great big oyster, you know, from his spittle. And he would put it right in the middle of his plate where this kid could see it. And this kid make him sick. He couldn't eat. He'd take his food and he'd eat the hell out of it. You know what I mean? Kids were that I grew up with was always institutionalized kids, and you had to be tough. You had to be, because there was a pecking order, and you had to be. You had to let them know that you were tough, and consequently you had a lot of fist fights. But our fist fights was always fair, no biting, never. If you bit or kicked or didn't fight fair, buddy, you really got it. I mean, the whole damn bunch would jump on you. See, it had to be on the up and up, and whoever won. You know, so you didn't tackle with that guy no more.
All right.
And I fought for winning a lot of times. A lot of times I did. Anyway, before I went in the Marine Corps, after I learned to where my mother lived and to go to see her on Mars Hill. Mars Hill is right off of Nowensville Road, which is pretty close to TIS. We'd crawl under the building and I'd take him to my mother's, you know, because he had never drank coffee before. Well, she had a pot of coffee this one time, first time I took him there, I think. And it put cream and sugar in it, you know. My mother put cream and sugar in it for him, and he chug-a-lugged it. I mean, he didn't even take it down till it was all gone, you know. and and he did that about twice till the pot was empty. See, and he picked it up and it had maybe a fourth of a cup left in it, and he poured it and it was out, and he was, and my mother said, "You've got to squeeze the handle." Oh boy, he started squeezing that damn handle. You know, he was squeezing it, and he thought there was more coffee in it. You know, if he squeezed the handle, it'd come out. You know, we all laughed. He laughed too about it. You know, but he was one. He was something. I wrote quite a bit about him in the book. When I left to go into the Marine Corps, the last time I seen him, I hugged him, and I told him how much I loved him and thought. And I said, "You're going to be all right now, won't he?" I says, "If anybody," and I said it loud enough for all of them to hear me, "if anybody bothers you in any way, I'll come back and I'll get them alive." You know. But anyway, that's when I went in the Marine Corps.
There's one other question about the school. Was the school segregated? Were all the kids there white?
No.
Or were they mixed white and black?
It was segregated back in 1937 to 1942. We had no black kids there at all. I understand now when they started committing black kids to TIS. By this time, though, it wasn't like it was. It was not a. It wasn't like they didn't work kids like I did, but and they weren't mean to them like they was. But when they changed the name of it from TIS to TPS, Tennessee Preparatory School, it was because Tennessee Industrial School had a bad name. It had bad, you know, I mean, and when they changed the name, then they, of course, they started admitting black kids too. My understanding is they had a big riot one time between them, but they didn't really come to blows. They didn't come to blows, but they had knives and all that kind of stuff. See, had the whites against the blacks. Well, that could never have happened when I was there anyway. I mean, it was just. We were too regulated to even begin to think of anything like that, even if they'd had black kids, you know. But they closed it down. See, that the TIS wasn't supposed to. It was supposed to be in perpetuity. See, the colonel, I forget his name now, that gave that property to the state of Tennessee, and I think he even built the building. He gave it to them under the condition that it would never ever be anything used for anything but for the kids, for homeless kids, and properly used for homeless kids. Well, and it's on paper, it's recorded. But Tennessee, I think it was about 1980 or something, or before that maybe. I don't know the date. But they took the place over and done away with the school. It's no more there. But before they took it away, it was they had changed the name to Tennessee Preparatory School, make it sound better, you know.
Right. Okay.
But you know, there's quite a bit.
All right. Well, of course, this is a veterans.
The book that I've written is extremely important, extremely interesting. I mean, it is, and it's all true. It all really happened. Both in my, I've written quite a bit about my Marine Corps experiences too. You know, in it.
All right. Now, of course, we want to kind of get to the Marine Corps experience, since this is in part a Veterans History Project interview. Now, in your storyline, you'd kind of gotten us up to the point where you arrive at boot camp, you get out to Parris Island. Why don't you pick up the story there and tell us something about that?
When I arrived at boot camp, I was scared to death all the time that they would find out that I wasn't of age, you know, and that they would send me home.
Right.
I didn't want that. I wanted to be a Marine. And when I got there, we had Corporal Thompson was my platoon leader, my drill instructor, DI, and then we only had one. There was not two, and I think it was because they had a shortage of men, see, at that time. And this was before the Marines had landed on Guadalcanal. Well, he was a small fella. He wasn't big. He was a Southerner. And I hit it off with him pretty good for that reason. But I remember one time, he would fall us out, and if a fella needed a shave, I never needed a shave, you know, I didn't even have fuzz. But he would fall us out, and if somebody needed a shave, he would send him in to get his razor, safety razor, and when he come out, he would take that safety razor and rub it in the sand, dull it up pretty good, you know. And he'd call another kid out to shave him. And I can remember saying, if I don't see some blood, you're going to get shaved yourself. So I mean, there would be some blood come, you know. It wasn't bad, but it hurt. And I know damn well it hurt. And other times he would come in, and he was a good drill instructor. Don't get me wrong, he was. I liked him very much. He would come in from Georgia, from the little old town near there. Anyway, he would and it would be maybe 3 o'clock in the morning, maybe. See, and he'd be stewed, and he'd fall us out. Well, when you fell out, you fell out in platoon formation at attention, you know, and you stood at attention until he hollered at ease, or parade rest. Well, he would go in his was in Quonset huts then. They didn't have. Anyway, when he would he'd hit the sack, and he'd forget all about us being out there, and we'd standing out there at attention now, and those sand fleas after dark, those sand fleas would eat you up, you know. I mean, and you didn't dare squat one of them. If you squatted, if you busted a sand flea, you had to bury him. I mean, he made you bury him. And you didn't bury him just an inch or two, you know. You had to dig a deep hole to bury that sand flea if you killed one of them. But anyway, he'd fall us out, and we'd have to stand there until reveille, see. Then he'd get out and he'd say, fall out. And we were already out there at attention. He'd see us by that time, you know, but he'd holler that anyway. And that didn't happen all the time, but it happened often enough that, yeah, if you dropped a rifle, you know, in those days, you slept with it, and if you dropped it twice, you slept with two. How many times that you dropped a rifle, that's how many times you had to sleep with that rifle. And back then, you know, this one big guy, he was from New York. He was a big fella, much bigger than Thompson. And he got kind of snotty like, you know. So Thompson said, "You like to have a piece of me?" "Yeah," he said. "Okay." He said, "Come out." We took him out behind the head. The head was a Quonset hut there too, and we heard some licks being landed, and so pretty soon here comes this guy out. And he looks like he'd been put in a meat grinder, you know. And Thompson would have a knot here or there, you know, but he wouldn't. And he said, now get in formation and stand at attention, you know, and he'd make him stand at attention when we was all at ease, you know, or parade rest. And he'd make him stand there for a while just to let him know what was going on. Now, people, I've seen them run a towel around their head and run them against the Quonset hut until they knocked themselves cold. But now you think, oh, but you see, that's nothing compared to when they get into combat. Nothing compared to what they'd have to go through. It saved their lives. It saved a lot of guys' lives that just seen him doing it, you know, not just the ones that it happened to. But and it made Marines aggressive, you know, and they were. Still are. Marines are very aggressive.
Now, what did the regular training consist of? I mean, you're talking about kind of the extracurruncular parts and so forth.
Yeah.
It was, what's the main routine?
It was close. A lot of close order drill. A lot of close order drill, and running obstacle courses. Now, one time when we went on the rifle range, it was a different place, and you went up. They had wooden barracks like those army barracks, two-tier army barracks, wooden, up there on the rifle range. And I remember the DI would sit on my back, Thompson, he would sit on my back, and he would say, now, if I see Maggie's drawers, I'm going to push your head down in that sand. And so on slow fire, I was very good, very accurate on slow fire. Now, when they ran up the silhouette targets at 200 yards, they'd run up them silhouette targets. The main thing wasn't hitting the target. The main thing was getting off the 10 or 15 rounds that you were supposed to get off. You see, the Springfield 03 is what I used. The Army was getting the M1s, and the Marines was getting the Marines got all the World War I crap, and the Army got all the new stuff. But anyway, when they run up the silhouette targets for rapid fire, the 03 is bolt action,
right?
And the stock was too long for me. See, a slow fire, I could take my time to put it in there, you know. But at rapid fire, in order to get the rounds off, see, I couldn't do that. So by the time I had the second shot off, the thing was up on my shoulder, wasn't it? And the Springfield 03 kicks like a 12-gauge shotgun with high brass. And man, when I come off of that rifle range, I mean, my eye was swollen, my lip was all swollen and bleeding, and I suffered to get off those rounds because anyway, he had bet they all knew I was they called me Chicken, young and tender, see? He bet that Chicken would qualify. Chicken would qualify on his first trip to if you didn't qualify, they held you back for the next platoon that was coming up. And I wanted to stay with that platoon anyway. But anyway, when he bet all the DIs on that post that I know of that I would qualify. And I did, see? Well, I was his fair-haired boy then for sure. You know, he made some money off of me. And I remember one time I was in you're not supposed to smoke in the barracks, you know? And so I was smoking a cigarette in the barracks, and he come through, the Marine at the door, at the hatch down there, he holler, attend hut, and everybody got out of their bunks and stood at attention, you know, if they were in their bunks. And I had that cigarette, see, and man, when he said that, I put it on the floor and I stood on it, you know. Boy, it was burning my heel like you wouldn't believe, you know. And when he come by, each guy, he would stop and look at him, you know, and look him up and down, each guy. He come to me and He stopped and he looked up and down. He knew damn well I had a cigarette, you know. Now, if it had been any other kid there, he would have jumped him, see? But he looked me square in the eye, and he knew I was standing on that cigarette, and he figured that was punishment enough. So he never said a word. He went on, but he could smell the smoke. He knew I was smoking a cigarette, you know. But I always got along good with him. But see, at TIS, when I went through boot camp, to me it was fun. It was fun, absolute fun. I was getting paid to do something that was less than what I had to do at Tennessee Industrial School, you know, and I loved it.
One of the few people treated better at boot camp than you had been before.
I was treated far, far superior, you know. I could, on my $20, you know, I could go and get ice cream. Ice cream, you know. Yeah. Never seen ice cream before. I remember one time somebody donated a dime to all us kids to go to the fair. And we walked to the fair from TIS. It was right there in the fairgrounds, was pretty close, a mile and a half or something. And I remember spending that dime 1,000 times before I got there. You know, it was more fun going there because I spent the dime. I bet you I made the dime into $100. You know, by spending it in my imagination. But when I got there, the dime went in a hurry. But and I think it was Mr. Mensler, the superintendent of TIS, that and you know, he wasn't a bad guy at all. I don't think he just didn't know what was going on. I think that was the biggest problem. I don't think he knew that spider webs was that mean to us. You know. And Bobby Moran hit that kid with a tomato steak and never seen him again. I don't know, that kid, Bobby Moran, we was steaking tomatoes. And Bobby Moran went to relieve himself. And when he come back, this kid he was to his back. And this kid, it's not exactly in the book this way, but this is the way it really happened. It's like this, but I'm going into a little more detail. He was saying, "Oh, Bobby Moran shoots a line of BS as long as my arm." Put his arm up like that, you know. And was trying to tell him, you know, and without coming out and saying it. We're trying to give him all kind of signs. Well, by the time Bobby Moran was close enough, he heard that, he seen it and heard it. Heck, he picked up a tomato steak. The kid never knew he was ever behind him. He picked up a tomato steak, which now our tomato steaks that we had at that day, you know a regular fence post, a 4-inch regular fence post or 3-inch, whatever they are, regular piece of wood.
Yeah.
We split that 4 ways. So a tomato steak was 1/4 of one of them. He picked that tomato steak up and he whacked that kid across the back. That kid went down and out, and he was hauled to sick bay. I don't know who took what we called the infirmary. They hauled him to sick bay, and I never seen him again, and I never know of anybody else that ever seen him again. I don't know if the kid died or what happened to him, but I know I never seen him again.
Okay, let's take you back again to the Marine Corps. How long did you spend in boot camp?
6 weeks. I believe it was 6 weeks. I believe it was 6 weeks, the best I can remember.
Right. And then what happened after that?
Then I went from boot camp. We went to Quantico by train, and we were billeted in Quantico in pyramid tents because there was so many coming in by that time. They had no other room, and they didn't even have time to build Quonset huts for them. So and we was there in Quantico just long enough for our orders to be cut. And they one night, it must have been about a week after we was there. One night we they broke us out. We fell out, and they marched us to the train tracks at Quantico, and they had lined up boxcars, and just plain old boxcars. And they put us in these boxcars and they locked them. They locked the boxcars. And we could sit down, but there wasn't much room to sit. So we stood because it didn't take long at all to get to New York. They highballed it, and we went straight through. We didn't load until after dark. And after we loaded, we got to New York. The train went right to the docks, and we got off of the train, walked into the side of this up the gangway into the side of this little old rusted Spanish liner. It wasn't big as a minute, you know. The Purser Square on it was about half as big as this room, and they had in the staterooms they had taken all they had made bunks on the sides of the bulkhead, and so when we loaded, they highballed it out of there with that little old Spanish liner. We had to be out of the sight of land by dawn, you know, and sure enough, I thought I was going to get to see the Statue of Liberty, you know, no way. At daylight, we was way out in the Atlantic Ocean.
Now, are you sailing with the same men that you trained with, or is this a new group of people?
Yeah, basically the same guys that I trained with, that I went through boot camp with.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, did the drill instructors stay behind back at the boot camp, or were they coming with you?
By the way, Warwick, I lent Warwick $10 at Quantico before we shipped out for Northern Ireland. I lent Warwick $10 and I never got it back. I don't, and if he's alive today, maybe he'll give me my $10 back.
Maybe you'll see the book.
Yeah, I liked Warwick. He was a nice guy, a kid. You know, we were nothing but kids. Hell, these people was only 18.
Right.
You know,
Right.
17, 18 years old. And some of them probably my age. But anyway, we shipped out that night, and at that time, in September, the Germans was sinking everything that left New York, but we left without a convoy. That helped us too, I believe. Plus, this little old Spanish liner, it was flying the American flag, but I think the reason the Germans didn't sink that was because they didn't want to waste a torpedo on it, because the hunting in them days for them was really good. That was their happy days, you know.
Yeah. But they still, you know, they didn't catch everything, and a ship that went by itself usually could go fast enough that it was hard for the U-boats to catch.
Oh yeah, but with the zigzag course, it took us twice as long to get there as it would have if it hadn't been a war on, because of there was zigzagging, see? And it could be that a sub just never spotted us, though we did go through mattresses, pillows, tables, chairs, and everything else. You know?
You saw wreckage from where other ships had been sunk.
And we only dumped our garbage at night because the subs could detect that if during the daytime, but. And it was mostly at night. We could go out at night on the deck, but mostly in the day they discouraged us from going on deck because in case the sub did see us, they didn't want to see a bunch of young guys on there, you know, because they knew that would be troops, and they would be willing to waste a torpedo on us. But we were lucky; we made it, you know, and.
What was the weather like on the crossing?
Oh,
stormy or calm or?
It was real chilly. It was really cool. I imagine the water was cold.
Yeah.
If if we'd been torpedoed, you know, we was by ourselves, and even in a convoy at those times, nobody stopped to pick up anybody, you know. But we would have just had it because we didn't have enough lifeboats for a battalion of Marines on there, you know, and we were jammed like sardines. It was really hot below decks, I can remember that.
Do you remember how long the trip took?
It took about 2 weeks.
Okay.
Normally it's half that time. But the route we took was trying to fool them into thinking we weren't going where they thought we was going to help somebody, you know, fight them, you know.
Right. And so where did you land?
In Belfast, Northern Ireland. I remember the train station. I remember when we got to this train station, there wasn't no roof on it. That was blowed all to hell. The Germans they had blowed that place to pieces, and the Irish was real quick. They repaired them tracks real quick. You know, they needed them trains, and they didn't waste no time repairing those tracks. But and we loaded up and went for Londonderry, and Londonderry was a port that it's right on the Foyle River, and every warships could go up there if they weren't too big. All your destroyers could get up there, and they had a Navy base there, and they had big oil tank fields. They had oil tank fields there, and they had a great big ammo dump. It was about a mile long, and the magazines, it was called the Pincarn Glen, and the magazines was dug out in the hill, in the sides of both sides of the hills, and they were reinforced concrete, reinforced Quonset huts. The magazines were, and I don't know, there must have been at least 100 of them. And that's where they stored all the ammo that was to fight the Germans with, you know. That's where they come to pick it up.
Right.
And that's where they had the ammunition for the Normandy Invasion. Well, at one time I was a guard on that. Several nights I guarded there, and we were told that to watch out for German saboteurs, that they wanted to blow up that dump, and they would come ashore by submarine, and they had crossbows, and they would shoot us with a bolt in the back, you know,
because it was quiet and had no muzzle flash,
so they could get in to blow the. So we had to really be on our toe. You don't know what it is to stand guard 4 hours, 4 on, 4 off, and stand guard for 4 hours, wondering if you're going to get a bolt in the back at all times. You know, you couldn't hunker down like in combat. You could at least hunker down because you knew what was going to. But in circumstances like that, you just didn't know whether somebody was going to sneak up and do you in, you know, because there was a lot of ways they could do it.
Right.
And you know that they was after that ammo dump. You knew that, you know. As a matter of fact, one night it was raining like it does in Ireland. It rains a lot. But it was raining this night, and it was quite dark. But this German bomber come over, and I could see the white cross on its fuselage because it was low. It was real low, a little bit higher than this ceiling here. I don't know whether he was lost, whether he was looking somewhere to dump his load, or you know, I don't know why he was there. But anyway, when I looked up, this path that we walked inside this chain link fence that was barbed wired and electrified on top. When I walking inside that fence, there was no grass because of the walking, you know, and it was clay. It was a regular red, like not Georgia clay, but it was, yellow clay. Slippery as all heck when it was wet. Well, when I looked up, I seen it. I slipped and I went down, and I was carrying my M1 upside down, and the muzzle of my rifle went in the mud, and I never thought about it. I just brought the M1 up and fired at that plane. I fired 8 rounds at it. Well, the first round I fired, I was conscious of the fact that it kicked much harder than it normally would have, but I fired the other. They worked. The other 7 rounds went off, but they had no kick at all to them. Anyway, I never thought anything more about it. I got back to the guardhouse, and when I went to put my rifle in the rack in the middle of the Quonset hut, I put my rifle in the rack. I noticed that about a quarter of an inch or less from the very end of the muzzle, it was puffed out like a small balloon. Now, to puff that steel out like that, and what happened? If it'd been a bolt-action rifle, I'd have got a bolt in my face, or the whole cylinder would have blew up on me. But because it was an M1, between the gas port at the end that operates it, between that gas port and the muzzle, there's a little that little hole. That gas managed to get out of there, but still, it still blew that. And they issued me a new rifle, but that was a freak thing. When we first got there, the air raid sirens would go off at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and we had a air raid shelter in my particular section. We had an air raid shelter that was a Quonset hut dug deep in the ground and covered with dirt, and it was extremely cold and damp in there, and we'd have to go in there for an hour or two, a couple hours. When they have an air raid, we'd have to go in there, and when the air raid siren went off, you grabbed your rifle, you grabbed your cartridge belt with the bayonet on it, and you grabbed your steel helmet, your gas mask, and just in your skivvy drawers you headed for the. Well, when you sit in there in just your skivvy drawers for a couple of hours, you're cold. I mean, it's really cold, and you can't wait to get back in that sack to warm up. But by that time, revelie's coming up, But well.
Right. Now, at this point in time, what unit were you serving with? What was your unit at that time? What battalion were you in?
It was the First Provisional Marine Battalion, yeah.
And its main purpose was just to guard facilities in Northern Ireland?
Yeah, that's what they used us for, to guard all the facilities and to stand guard at the officers where they held these officers meetings, for strategy and all that kind of stuff, And but the guard duty was horrible, I mean, I hated guard duties. 4 hours, all you'd do is just stand there or walk,
Right. Now, during the time that you were stationed there, as far as you know, did any German saboteurs actually infiltrate or try to? You had the stories about what they would do, but did they ever do it?
Yeah, I never heard of any. They had one time, this will get you. One time they had this girl and her mother, and the guys called them the OD and the sentry, the officer of the day and the sentry. Well, the mother was pimping for her daughter. And they would come around to these Marines that was guarding, and offer the services. Well, I don't believe anybody ever took them up on it. I don't. I think that, but they were relentless, you know, and they kept it up. And there was some kind of rumor, which I think was a bunch of manure. There was some kind of a rumor that they were working for the Germans to find out some information or something, you know, or to distract a guard while the German could do what he had to do, you know. But I don't know about that. But I do know that the OD and the sentry, because I seen them come by my post when I was guarding some oil fields in Springtown, which is about a mile or so from downtown Londonderry.
Right. Now, how much contact did you have with the civilian population?
We had a lot. We had a lot of contact with them. Yeah, we had. This is a comical thing. One time, Terlesky and I, Johnny Terlesky and I, we were following these two plainclothes Irish constabulary cops. You know, they called them the constabulary. And now Ulster is the sixth county, six counties in the north of Ireland. And they call it Ulster. Well, we was following them, and we just thought we'd have some fun, you know, like kids would do. And was walking close enough behind them to make sure they could hear what we were saying. And I said to Ski, I said, "Looky there," I said, we got two G-men over here in Northern Ireland. We got two G-men over here. And I said, "You think they're as smart as the G-men we got back in the States?" And he said, "They think they're fooling somebody. We know they're plainclothes cops." You know, stuff like that. We're just ragging them, you know. They never said a word. They never turned. They never said a word. But they were damn sight smarter than we thought they were. They found out our names. They must have asked somebody what our names were, you know. So the next day, our company commander called us into and we had office hours over that, and so we didn't that weekend. We didn't get no liberty that weekend. They took our weekend pass away from us, which was all right, you know. I mean, but we're just having some fun, you know. I've got a picture of me. It's in the book. Of me standing on the wall in Londonderry. Beside a cannon with the Londonderry Guild Hall, which is their government office building. It's standing behind me, you know, the big clock on it, on the, and that's going to be on the cover of Terrible Terry.
All right. Now, how long were you based in Ulster?
Huh?
How long were you there?
Oh, I was there 2 years. 2 years. After the Normandy Invasion, they didn't need us anymore. After they was established, you know, and they didn't need us anymore, so they shipped us home, and that's shipped me to Quantico, and that's where we Ski and I went to Washington, D.C. for our liberty.
Now, while you were based in Ireland, how far did you roam or travel? Did you stay in Northern Ireland, or did you go over to England at all, or anything like that?
No, we could have went. I didn't go to. A lot of the fellas did. I didn't. I never got past Belfast. By the time I got to Belfast, with the booze and the women, as far as I could go, you know. I mean, no point in going any further, you know. You had everything you wanted right there, so there wasn't any point in trying to go to England. I didn't care about the sightseeing part, and but it wasn't bad, you know. The duty was pretty good. Yeah.
Now, we had been talking about your time in Northern Ireland. Is there anything else you want to add to that story before we move you back over to the States again?
Other individual events? Or
Oh, yeah. You asked me if I had traveled around Northern Ireland. Yeah, you see, during time of war, World War II, you weren't allowed to wear civilian clothes at all, under no circumstances. And but in Ireland, we had, in order to get the people to like us, you know, we formed a bagpipe band. It's the only bagpipe band that was ever in the Marine Corps. And I think the Marine Corps may be a little ashamed of that. Otherwise, it would have been known better, you know. But it was a full bagpipe band. I was a bugler in that bagpipe band, and we traveled throughout Northern Ireland for shows, you know, to put on for the Irish people,
Right.
because they love to see us in our Marine greens, Marine Corps dress greens, squeezing them bagpipes, you know. And they'd laugh and clap. They thought we was great, you know. And they played a lot of Gary Owen, that bagpipe tune, Gary Owen, that old
7th Cavalry theme song, among other things.
that was what's his name's theme song, Custer.
General Custer, that's
Yeah,
right.
General Custer's theme song, later Colonel Custer. But I guess I think he had the Marine mentality and the Marine gung-ho-ness, but he just didn't have the other fellows. He didn't have the Marines to go with him. But he, you know, George Patton was really a Marine. He was really a Marine. He was
the
in
right
he
mentality.
was in an Army uniform, but he had Marine mentality. He wanted to go after them, get them, and kill them. You know, and that's what you do in war.
Right.
You don't draw back.
Now, when you came back across the ocean to get back, did you go back to New York again, or?
Yeah, no, we landed at Norfolk.
Okay.
And the trip back was a real pleasure. It was aboard a regular troop transport. It wasn't, and so the accommodations were quite a bit better than going. And when we landed at Norfolk, we went right away to Quantico, Virginia. And I was at Quantico, I can't remember how long now, but I was there long enough to go home on furlough. You know.
Now, what did you do when you went home?
I had one leave. Out of that out of the 4 years in the Marine Corps, I had one furlough.
Right.
When I went home, see, when I went in the Marine Corps, my stepfather, Richard Rose, he was real bad. He would drag me from room to room by the hair of my head at times, you know, when I was a kid, when I was home,
Right.
between the time I was at the John W. Thomas Fresh Air Camps and when I was put into Tennessee Industrial School, there was a small amount of time there that I was at home, and that's when he'd beat the crap out of me, pull me around by the hair of my head, you know. And my mother never seemed to want to interfere, and she could have. I mean, he wasn't a big guy. She could have beat the crap out of him, you know. That was my opinion of her, and she was like that, you know. She wasn't somebody you fool around with, but I guess she didn't care. So, but anyway, I went to Grand Rapids, see, because my stepfather, was working in the Army mess hall in Nashville, right there at Greenville Pastures, and he met this second lieutenant in the Army, and by the name of Veltman. His last name was Veltman. I don't remember what his first name was, but he offered my stepfather, Richard Rose, he offered him a job in the Veltman cookie factory in Grand Rapids, see, as a foreman. So it was a much better paying job.
Right.
So Rich grabbed it, see, and her and my mother moved to Grand Rapids. They moved in on Hall Street on Madison Square. Well, Madison Square now is an entirely different place than it was then. Madison Square now is it's pretty well run down. But anyway, back then, they wrote me. I got a letter from my mother. I think one letter the whole time I was in overseas the first time, and she had told me that she had moved there and given me the address so that if I ever got a chance, I could come there, come home. Well, I went there on furlough, and I didn't have any money. I had, maybe $10 in my pocket, but when I thought maybe that I could get some money from her, and because I'd been giving her $30 a month, I thought maybe she would have a little bit left for me. But when I got home, I didn't have any. So, but I didn't really need money. Every bar, I'd go into a bar, and I was only, at that time, I was only 17. I would, or 16 and a half, 17. I'd go in a bar and, everybody would buy me a beer, in my uniform. And I met up with I went to Ramona Park, skating rink in Ramona Park. And to pick up a gal, I mean, that's the way it goes. But anyway, this gal came over and started talking to me, She talked with me for quite a while, but nothing developed. But I did meet some teenage boys still in school yet. They had a car, and I remember, they wanted me to pal with them because I could get gasoline that they couldn't, and they'd drive. I remember driving all around Grand Rapids, going up to Grand Haven and all that. I really enjoyed that. So and the money didn't bother me that much because I really didn't need all the money. But anyway, when I left, I met a fella, another Marine, on the train going up from Detroit to Grand Rapids. I can't remember his name right now. I know it real well. He worked for the Bell Telephone Company when he got out of the Marines. And he lived just off Madison Square. And he went to Union High School right there on Madison Square, Well, and it was 1970, I think it was. I went to look him up. They had promoted him and put him in the head man in Muskegon, either Grand Haven, I think it was Muskegon, and as a supervisor for Bell Telephone. And when I went to look him up, lo and behold, they told me he had died. He had a heart attack and died. And I wanted to see him. I wanted to talk to him, but.
So you met him while you were in Grand Rapids, then on the furlough, or when you got on the train to head off to where you were going next?
Well, when I was on furlough, anyway, when my furlough was just about up, I got a plane, and I don't know where I got the money for I can't remember where I got the money for the plane. At Grand Rapids Airport then was there around pretty close to Horton Street there anyway, that little airport. They didn't have any other, and the biggest plane they had was a DC-3. There was nothing bigger than that. And I remember walking out on the tarmac and getting up those 3 steps to get in that plane. And I remember when you sit down, you sit kind of like you're sitting on a hill, you know. Flew to D.C. and from D.C. I got a bus down to Quantico, and then I don't remember really how long I was at Quantico until they shipped me out to Camp Pendleton.
Mm-hmm.
I went through some extra combat training in Camp Pendleton, and I fired again for record at Camp Pendleton. Then I fired expert that time. The first time out of in Parris Island with the 03, I only fired marksman because the rapid fire was the one that really done me under.
Right.
But I did qualify, and but see, in the Marine Corps you had marksman, sharpshooter, and expert. And I fired sharpshooter with a pistol at Parris Island. But that rifle, it would kick, you know.
Right.
But anyhow, then I was at Camp Pendleton until they I don't know, I shouldn't probably mention his name, but anyway, I sat down on a bench at Pershing Square in L.A., you know, and I didn't have any money, so I was just sitting there watching the pigeons, and somebody comes sit down beside of me, you know. I done a double take. He was without calling his name, I say he was a pal of one of the famous cowboy movies, stars. He was one of their pals. And he said to me, he said, "You want a drink?" And I said, "Yeah, I'd like to have a drink." So he said, "Come on." So we went right across Pershing Square, across the street. And there was this door with a little peephole. It was a private club, see? And he rang the bell, and the guy opened it and said, "Oh, okay." So, and he called him by name, which I won't call.
Okay.
So we went in, and we bellied up to the bar, and then I downed a couple of drinks, you know, and pretty soon he put his hand where it doesn't belong.
Oh.
You know?
Yeah.
Okay. I said, "Hey, wait a minute. What the hell are you doing?" He said, "Well, I thought there was an understanding." I said, "There sure as hell is, and if I don't get out of here, I'll beat your head plumb off." So I turned around and got out of there, you know. And he's dead now. He's not alive, but I still don't want to. I still rather not mention his name. But everybody knew him real well, real well. And anyway, I got out of that place, you know, and so I just I hung around there for a while until I got hitchhiked back to Camp Pendleton. There's always hitchhiking, you know.
Right. Did you go to anything like sort of USO shows or canteens or anything like that was set up in LA or these other places?
Oh, let me tell you, I didn't go. I never went to canteens. I didn't. I don't know why, but I did go to a radio show. First, I went to work for Van Camp's Pork and Bean place in Hollywood or LA, somewhere there, and they would let us work as long as we wanted to, and they would pay us as soon as we got done.
Right.
As soon as we, so I worked there just long enough to get. I think I worked there long enough to get $5, which was, I think, maybe $2. It wasn't long. I didn't work long.
Right.
And I think I worked about 2 hours. And they give me, I think it was $1.50 or something like that, $2. And but as I remember, and anyway, I went to this show, and it didn't cost me nothing to get in. It was radio, NBC or CBS then, you know. I can't remember, or ABC, I can't remember. But I believe it was CBS. But anyway, they had this program on where they had, it was a contest, you know. So they called for, there was a Navy female wave.
Yep.
There was a wave and an Army guy, which I call dog faces. They call us a jarhead, you know. And there was me, and I think that about four. There was four or five of us up there. But anyway, the one that they said, now the one that answers the most questions accurately gets they get what they've asked answering for, you know. But anyway, I got more questions right than all the rest of them put together. Now I'm not bragging. That's just something that happened.
Okay.
It just happened to be that the questions I knew about, you know. Well, when it was over and time to award it, all I got out of that was a box of Courtly soap. I can remember that just like it. And they busted it all up even. They gave everybody a little bit of something, and it was the biggest, phoniest thing you ever seen in your life, you know. And I thought I would get the booby prize, you know. I got the booby prize, a box of Courtly soap, which was all right, but I had no use for a box of Courtly soap. But anyway, I had fun. That was fun anyway. It's just something that happened.
Now, at this point, what Marine unit were you serving with? Or were you attached to a unit, or were you just at Camp Pendleton waiting?
I was in a replacement detachment then. I don't know, it was a 52nd, 64th.
But you were in a replacement unit. You were waiting to be assigned to a regular
waiting
unit.
to be assigned to a unit when I got overseas. Once I landed overseas. But anyway, when we shipped out from San Diego, the way I understand it, the troop ship that we was supposed to go on was already overloaded, and so they had this escort carrier. They called them baby carriers,
right.
And it was going to Hawaii, and it was loaded, absolutely loaded with Corsair fighter planes. I mean, the flight deck, the hangar deck was absolutely loaded.
And those were planes that had wings that sort of folded up, right? So you could put more of them in there.
Yeah. They were, and it was completely, totally loaded. And they put us on the hangar deck underneath the wings and the fuselage of these Corsairs. And if you raised up at night, if not, you know, it was on canvas wooden cots while you bang your head on the bottom of them planes. And during the day, when we was on the hangar deck, they didn't want us on the flight deck at all. And they would do target practice with these 40-millimeter pom-poms on the sides, and when they would fire those guns, it would sound like somebody on the bulkhead hitting it with a sledgehammer. But anyway, I snuck off. I went up on deck, and I went to the fantail. They call them fantails on a aircraft carrier, and the fantail is the where the planes come in to land, you know, and it's rolled like that, and I sit there with my legs over, and right below the stern of the ship, they had a 5-inch 38 mounted artillery piece or a cannon, and they was throwing crates, wooden crates empty wooden crates over the fantail, and wait until they got out a ways, you know, and shoot at them. Well, I was up there, and I could, I was right above it, and the sun, the way the sun was, I could see the 5-inch shell go. You know, I could see it until the time it left the barrel, till it hit. So, and I could see where it was going to hit way before it hit there. And I would holler down at them, you know. I'd say, you're about 10 foot short. You need 10-foot elevation, or you're 3 or 4 feet to the right before it ever hit, see? Sure enough, that's where it would hit. And finally, they got fed up with me, see? They hollered up there, get the hell off of that deck. Get on back down on the hangar deck where you belong. So I did, you know, but these things happen, and but I enjoyed that. When we got to Honolulu, I got out. I did go downtown the first day. Downtown Honolulu the first day. I remember, but I just got glimpses in my mind of some of the shops. You know, that's all I can remember. I didn't do anything, and the next day, 2 of the fellas, and I can't recall who they were, said, one of them said, I know where there's a good pool to go swimming in. You know, I said, good, we'll go, you know. So we did. We went down, we took all our clothes off. We climbed up this high cliff about 75 feet. We climbed up there and we'd dive off. You know, we'd come back up and we'd climb up there and we'd dive off. Well, pretty soon, we dove off and we climbed out to climb back up again, and there was 2 shore patrol guys there standing there. And they said, put your clothes on, you're under arrest. And I said, what for? You're in a restricted area. This is Women Marines area, and you're in a restricted area. Well, come to find out, on the about, my guess would be about 500 yards, maybe between 500 and 1,000 yards on the other cliff. We could see the barracks, but we didn't know they were women Marine barracks. There was these old Army wood two-tier barracks, but we didn't know there was women Marine barracks, and they must have had binoculars or something. But anyway, they arrested us, and we told them we didn't know that, you know, and they arrested us, and I remember they put us in the stockade there, and the stockade was awful. It was, you talk about chlorine, man. I mean, that chlorine would choke you. The odor of it would. In the stockade, it was nothing but tent. It was just like that Arizona sheriff's got down there. See, and it was hot, and they kept me there. They didn't charge me with anything, and they kept the other 2 and me, but I never seen the other 2 guys again. I don't know what happened to them, but anyway, I don't remember who they were. But when it come time to ship out, they loaded us onto a troop transport, and we shipped out for Okinawa by way of Eniwetok and Guam. And we landed, we went down cargo nets just off the coast of Okinawa at Naha. Just north edge of Naha. And I remember walking down through Naha, on single file on each side of the road, and there wasn't any house standing. That whole city was completely destroyed. And we crossed the longest Bailey Bridge that the Marine Corps ever built at that time. And they built that bridge under fire, but and the ridge just on the other side of the bridge, there was a high ridge, and that's what we had just taken when that's where we dug in at. That's where they assigned us to machine gun platoon.
All right. And now, what unit were you part of? What battalion, regiment?
Fox Company, 2nd Battalion, 29th Marines,
All right.
6th Marine Division.
Okay.
Yeah.
And had the division been there for some time? Were you joining that as a replacement?
It had been there some time,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah, this was, Naha was about the middle of the island, you know, and the southern end was where the hardest fighting
Right.
was, even though the 6th Marine Division cut completely across when they landed on the west coast of Okinawa. They went across, they cut completely across, cut the island in two, and swung north. And they had the north taken by the 1st of May.
Right.
They had the north secured, the whole north half of the island. But the Japanese were not in force on that end of the island nearly like they were on the
Right.
south end. And but it was still pretty tough going. We lost a lot of Marines taking that, but I wasn't a part of that part of it.
So now you're coming in and you're joining a company that's been in combat and so forth. Do you have any sense of how many replacements came in with you to that unit? Or
No, it's like combat itself. It's just you and 2 or 3 or 4 other fellows. That's all you see. It's all you know about.
Right.
You know, as you're actually engaging the enemy. You don't even know what the plan is or nothing. You're just when you know the enemy's there, you do your best to kill him. You know, and that's all you know about it.
so at this point, you've been in the Marine Corps for about 3 years, but you haven't really been in combat at all
No,
up to
not-
this point.
no, not
Did
in-
you have any idea what to expect as you were going in, or what?
Well, in Northern Ireland, with the air raids and stuff, I had an idea, you know, and so I wasn't keyed up in any way, you know. The first Japanese I think the first Japanese I killed, I think was in that little village south of, just across the Asakawa from Naha. It was, I believe, it was the only house in that village that it hadn't been touched. It just wasn't touched. I don't know why. All the rest of them wasn't nothing left, but the floors was there, you know, the wooden floors. Well, but this one, me and 3 other, let's see, it was 3, 4, me and 4 other kids went to check this house out. It was out in front of our lines. And Jarowski was one of the guys, I can remember his name. We went around this house in single file, and as Jarowski went by, he saw a hole about this big right about knee high in this, maybe a little lower than the knee, in this wall, facing the way the Nips thought we was going to come, you know, but we was coming a different way than they thought. Well, he stepped over that hole, and there was the kid behind him, wasn't paying much attention, I guess, and he started to bend over to look in that hole, and I kicked him in the rear. He went sprawling, you know, on his face. And when he was getting up, he said, "What did you do that for?" You know, and I pointed to that hole, and I started to step over it, you know, and I just got over it, and maybe took a step, and I heard a rifle go off right behind me. I turned, and this Marine went down. He was shot through both knees, I believe. I know he was shot through one. And when that happened, Jarowski and the kid in front of me, they took off. They went around in a hurry around back the way we had, you know, where we had come from.
Right.
And I had nothing that I could do. I know I couldn't carry him very far, especially with one hand. So I grabbed him by the collar, and I was firing my M1 from the hip, and I put a round right in that hole, and I was firing APs. You know, and an AP is it's a ball ammunition, but it doesn't. Instead of having a lead core, it has a tempered steel core with a real sharp point on it.
So AP as an armor piercing?
So it would penetrate a lot more than. Anyway, I fired that, and when one of those hits something at a glance, it'll ricochet all over the place. But anyway, I fired in that hole. I grabbed him by the collar, and I looked, and there was 2 shell holes out in front of us, and they were about 10 foot apart. That neither one of them was big enough to hold both of us. So but one was all right. I dumped him in that shell hole, and I jumped in the other one, and I hollered to him, "Don't raise up! Don't raise up!" And I'm firing in that hole, see, and so they can't fire out when I'm firing it, and I was hitting in there every shot. I couldn't miss it. So I ran low on ammo, and they started throwing grenades. And
now, where were they throwing from? Were they in the house?
Out in the yard. They was out in the yard.
Okay.
See, this house, I didn't describe it very. It had a thatch roof, but it had stone wall.
Okay.
All the way up to the eaves, and that stone wall went all the way out. And there was a yard, and that stone wall continued out, and it went. And there was a gate, a wooden gate on a wooden door on one end of that wall, and that end of that stone wall on the end, and that yard must have been about maybe 20 foot by 15 foot, and they was throwing grenades at me. They didn't know where I was, so the first one, the grenade went off pretty close to the wall, and I kept firing in that. Well, they knew they hadn't got me, so they kept throwing them further. You know, I kept firing. Well, they must have ran out of grenades or something, because they didn't. By the time they got to where they would have got me with one, they was there's out of them, I guess. But anyway, I hollered and I told him, I said, "I'll get a corpsman for you." And there was so much a noise going on that I didn't holler for a corpsman. For one thing, I didn't want him to expose himself.
Yep.
I was going to get the corpsman when I went around after we had killed these guys.
Right.
See? And I figured that he would last that long. Well, I run around and I got around to the other side, and the one kid had a phosphorus grenade. We only had one. We couldn't get them. You know, they were hard to come by. Everybody wanted them, phosphorus grenade. So he took that phosphorus grenade. It's about, the thing must be, the phosphorus grenade's a good 2.5 inches by probably 5 inches long. And they're relatively heavy and for a grenade. Right. And so he threw that up, and it landed right on the very crown of that grass roof and started rolling off. I thought sure it was going to go to the ground before it would explode, see, and may not set it on fire. Well, just as it got to the eave and started to drop, it went off. And when it went off, it set the whole roof on fire, see. Well, there was 6 separate explosions in that, so they were blowing themselves up. And that's why I know there was 6 in there, at least that. But anyway, after that, I completely, absolutely, completely forgot about that kid on the other side. You know, when you're under something like that, your mind don't do what it would normally do. I forgot about that kid, and now he would have bled to death if he didn't tourniquet his legs. You know, he would have bled to death. But I'm hoping, and look now, I don't remember me not being him trying to get abandoning him that way. I didn't even remember that for 40 years. 40 years before I suddenly remembered, doggone, that guy, I could remember that incident, but I could not remember not getting a corpsman for that guy, for that Marine, young kid. I just don't know why in the hell I didn't remember that, except my mind wouldn't accept it, see? That's the only reason. But, and I'm hoping today that he had enough gumption to tourniquet his legs, see, so that he, until the corpsman could get to him.
Now this was sort of
But
out
he couldn't walk.
Yeah, this was out in front of your line, and was it a while before your line advanced past that point?
We were mopping up. We were mopping up at that time. We were mopping up this little village that had been blown all to hell there, south of Naha.
Now, was there a larger battle going on at the time, or was this just a small kind of reconnaissance?
It was, larger was going on further inland. We were on the Oroku Peninsula at the time, and the Oroku Peninsula is on the east coast. See, we were right near the east coast of the Pacific, and there was a lot more going on, you know. And just like that, there was another place, I can't remember some places, but I remember we were dug in, and this old lady, she looked old, but she probably wasn't. They all looked old because of the conditions they was living under.
Right.
But there was a male guy, and he looked like, of course, had been dead for a day or two, I guess. But she was kneeling over him, and she was weaving back and forth, moaning and groaning in sorrow. And I looked out there and I seen her, and how in the heck she was living under all that dang firepower and stuff is beyond me. But I felt real sorry for that woman, I truly did. And we had our sea rations. The best thing in our sea rations was pork and beans. Mm-hmm. The very best thing in the sea rations. So I opened a can of pork and beans, and I crawled out there on my belly, and I put them pork and beans down in front of her. She didn't even know I was there, man. But I knew she was starving, you know, the hell they all were. And I wanted them beans for myself now, I'm telling you, it's true. But I just couldn't see me eating those beans and her not, you know, and her husband or her somebody, her relative was killed there. So I crawled back, and somebody wanted to shoot her because they didn't trust her, she might give away our position, whatever. But I didn't go along with that either, and nobody did. So the next morning, I looked out there, and the corpse was still in there, but she was gone, and so was that can of pork and beans. So she must have taken that can of pork and beans with her, you know. And I remember another time, Mary, oh God, the first hot meal we had on Okinawa was sauerkraut and wieners. And I was one of the last in line to get it, you know. There was no seconds, nobody could get seconds. Everybody would have wanted seconds, you know, but it was hot. Sauerkraut and wieners in a field kitchen, you know, and down pots out there on tripods. But anyway, I I got mine in my mess kit, you know, and I'm looking around for a place to sit down. And no, everybody had already grabbed a place, but there was a mound of dirt there where somebody had thrown a few shovels of dirt on this damn dead Jap, see? And I sit down, these old leathery hands sticking out in front of me, and I sat there and ate that, sitting on that dead Jap, eating that sauerkraut and wieners. But you know, then the odor, you'd think, the odor was absolutely terrible when we first landed on there. But by this time, the odor didn't bother you at all. It was stinking bad. And every time you opened your mouth to take a bite of food of your rations, K-rations or whatever, that damn big green flies, blowing flies was all over. They'd go in your mouth and you had to spit them out, you know. Them things was terrible. And I think the Japs raised them flies. I believe they raised them just, they wouldn't have to, you know. There's enough corpses laying all over. There was over 200,000, about 215 to 20,000 corpses laying all over that island, you know. Both Japanese Marines and sometimes there was a day or two picking a Marine up, you know, if he had been killed. It's just the way war is, you know.
Now, was your unit involved in any sort of direct assaults on fortified Japanese positions?
Oh yeah, yeah. On the southern end there was a ridge that, and on the way down, you know, I had to blow a big cave. It was the entrance was half as big as that curtain you got back there, and it was on our flank, and we were moving that way, and the cave was here. See, and we had to go that way. Well, you couldn't go. That cave had to be neutralized. See, and they tried to get somebody to blow it. It was a big one.
To blow it with
Yeah, and they called for volunteers. Somebody called for volunteers, and I didn't want to. I wasn't gonna, but nobody stepped forward, you know. So pretty soon I thought, well, hell with it, you know. I said, I'll do it. I didn't know I was no demolition. I didn't know the first thing. The only thing I ever knew how to blow was a damn hand grenade, you know. But anyway, I took the. They had a wooden crate of. I don't know what kind of explosive it was. It looked like brown sugar, and it was in bars, about probably 18-inch bars or 2-foot bars, and about three inches square, and they was square, and they were in brown wax paper. Well, I pulled a plank off, and I took a dynamite fuse, regular dynamite fuse. I cut it about 1 inch long. I split it with my K-bar, and we had some waxed kitchen matches. I put a waxed kitchen match in it, and the split what I'd done, and I took the detonator. I did this. I got away with it. Crimped it with my teeth. I could have blew my whole head off. Right. See? I had no crimping pliers. They used crimping pliers for that. I had no crimping pliers, and so I stuck it down through the one of them, and I took it down to the opening of that cave. I asked the sergeant if he'd send me if I could take a BAR man with me for protection, you know. Yeah, so the BAR man stood on that side of the entrance, and I was coming in from this side, see. So I struck the match, and I lit that match head. See, if you take a regular dynamite fuse and try to, with a flame, you won't never get it. It'll never go. You know why? the tar in that dynamite fuse covers that powder. It'll melt and cover that powder before the powder will start going off. Well, anyway, I did that, and it started burning. Now, I got a little fuse like this, and I've got at least 50 pounds of dynamite, or not it's more powerful than dynamite. And I went back in I'm watching the fuse. I'm not watching nothing but that damn fuse. I'm looking at that fuse burning, see? Because I was going to drop that thing if it got down there to where I thought it was going to go. I'd drop that and run, you know. But I got back in there far enough to set it down, and I run out, and just about the time I got out, just to turn the corner, that damn thing went off, man. I mean, it went. There was a telephone pole a regular telephone pole that was one of the support beams for that cave. It come flying out of there. It went out like a spear, you know, and it went about 100 yards before it came down. And man, I got to my feet, and I looked, and that cave, the whole front of that cave had just sealed off. There wasn't nothing. So I don't know how many civilians was in there, you know, but there had to be civilians, but there also had to be Japanese soldiers in it. But the reason you had to do that with that short fuse is they'd run out there and pull it out,
right.
You see? So you had to take your chances if you was going to be effective, you know. And Marines were effective. Well, the most I got for that was a nice job, Terry. You know, in the Army they'd have gave me a damn Silver Star or something,
right.
You know, but not in the Marine Corps. That was just regular duty. But those, that's a story. That's a story of a cat that and a can of sea rations, spaghetti spaghetti and meatballs. That I knew the meatballs wasn't worth a damn. I couldn't eat them. And believe it or not, that cat would rather eat that dead Jap than eat those meatballs. And he did too. The last I seen of that cat, he was still eating that off of that dead Jap, off of his arm that was raised up.
Now, did you have situations where you had to move forward under a lot of heavy fire, machine gun fire, artillery, or that kind of thing?
Yeah, on the southern end, just before we had to take this ridge, and just before we got to the plain that was before that ridge, our artillery was blasting them, and it was going, the artillery shells, 155 millimeter, 105, was going over our head about the high as this roof. I mean, they was just whistling over our head. Well, we thought we had it pretty well neutralized, so by the time we got to this open plain to assault this ridge, the machine guns opened up on us they caught us right out in the open. And I had just given one of my canteens of water to an old Okinawan fella for pulling these two Japanese nurses out from under this floor. That's another story. But and they were teenagers, and they were beautiful girls, beautiful rosy cheeks. And they thought that we would abuse them. You know, we wouldn't. There wasn't nothing. I knew of no Marine on there that had nothing on his mind but killing Japs. You know, but they didn't know that. They were told different.
Sure.
And so I begged them through this interpreter, this old Okinawan interpreter, not to hurt themselves, that we wasn't going to hurt them. We'd feed them and see that they got to their parents and all that. It did no good. They still blew themselves up. They put a grenade right on their stomach, you know, and blew themselves up. But I promised him the water if he would go into there and pull them out, you know. So he drug them out by their feet, and they were on their back. And man, I'm telling you, I had to give him the water. I said I would, and I gave it to him. He could speak English. I took a belt of 1,000 stitches off of a Jap I'd killed that night that had come charging us, you know. And it had each maiden in Japan had put one stitch in, and there was 1,000 of them. And it was in silk, and they had wrapped it in burlap. He had wrapped it in burlap, bare burlap, right next to his skin. How the hell he could stand that, I don't know. But anyway, I asked this Okinawan, and this was a little later after I'd given him the water, you know. I asked him, because we kept him with us pretty good, he followed along. And I said, what does it say on that? He said, I'm telling you just exactly the way he said it. He could speak English, you know, but it was, I'll say it just the way he said it. This say, all the luck as they front, all the luck as they front. That's just exactly the way he told it to me. I can remember that plain as hell. But anyway, he's the reason that when we was assaulting this ridge, two machine guns caught us in the open, dead to rights, man. I mean, and all you could do is hit the deck. That's all you could do. For one thing, and not move. If you moved, they would zero. You were hoping they'd think that they'd killed you, see? Because they didn't want to waste any ammunition. They needed what they had. And so I laid there, didn't move a muscle. And I was out of water. I figured I'd get water later, you know, that I wouldn't end up like this, waiting for water. You know, and we laid there for a good hour, and that machine gun would still tat-tat-tat at us, you know, until they finally sent a Sherman tank, and that Sherman tank come rolled right over me. I thought maybe that I'd had it then, you know. I think he might have thought I was dead, or he didn't see me, the driver, or something, you know. But anyway, it's a hell of a feeling to think it's a damn tank rolling right over you. But anyway, he come up and he neutralized those machine guns. See, they had nothing left to knock out the tank with, and he neutralized those. So we proceeded to attack that ridge, and we took it without very many casualties at all. But we took it, but I don't know how many was killed when the machine guns, I just don't know. You don't want to know. You don't even look. You don't try to. You don't want to know how many guys you've lost. You don't want to know. You don't want to see them, you know. You don't want to look at them.
Okay. Now, in this period, were you still part of the machine gun crew, or were you just a regular foot soldier at this point?
Yeah, I was a machine gunner, but all I did was carry ammo for the machine gun. And when the machine gun was set up, then I was moved out in front of it to protect it, see, as a rifleman. But and it was that night that I blowed that little boy's head off, shot the whole top of his head off. He was about 7 years old, maybe 8. And when I seen that head pop up in front of me, it was pouring rain, and I was by myself, because when we took the ridge, we had to dig in or get. You couldn't hardly dig in the ridges; they were coral, you know. So you went for shell holes or potholes, and I dove in this shell hole, and it was out in front of all the rest of them, right near the edge. I dove in this hole. It was full of water, and then it began to rain that night. It started pouring down. And I had my M1 laid up on that shell hole. I was pulling my poncho up over me to try to keep dry from here up, see? And I knew I wasn't going to get any sleep because there wasn't time to buddy up with anybody. Mm-hmm. And the hole wasn't quite that big enough anyway. But anyway, after dark, I see this head pop up in front of me. There's a sapling tree about that big, mm-hmm. about that big around growing up the edge of that cliff, and I'm right on the edge. And I see this head pop up in front of me against the skyline, and I grabbed my M1 when I felt it hit his head. See, I pulled a trigger. I thought I'd got a Jap that mm-hmm. night, you know. Well, the next morning, I went down that same tree that he had climbed up, and there was a little boy laying kind of upside down mm-hmm. at the foot of that, you know. And I see the whole top of his head missing, and his brains had washed grayish white. There was no blood around. The rain had washed everything away. And in his hand, he had a surrender ticket clutched in his hand, you know. It said on there in English and in mm-hmm. Japanese, "Don't come in at night." Mm-hmm. But you see, they knew that if they came in during the day, the Japanese would shoot them in the back.
Be shot by their own people.
Yeah. And so they took their chances on coming in at night. But if I'd have known that was a little boy, I would have grabbed him, mm-hmm. and I would have put him. I would have pulled him into that damn shell hole and protected him all night. Mm-hmm. There was a little girl that come through our lines. She had been shot through the side, all the way through the side. Didn't hit anything vital at all. I got down on my knees and I looked, and she only had a little dress on. And I looked under that dress, and she had, there was a damn hole that big, maggots all working all the way through it. Golly, I called a corpsman. I said, "You think she'll live?" And he took her back, and later I asked him, I said, "Do you think that little girl will live that you?" And he said he thought so. He said he thinks that they can do some grafting mm-hmm. and that she would live because the maggots had kept the circulation going and kept all that rotten, mm-hmm. so gangrene would not set in, see. But nobody knows what the hell war is until they've been in it. Mm-hmm. These people in this country don't realize it. They just don't. I don't blame them. I'm not blaming them. How in the hell would they know, you know? But for somebody telling them.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's why we have you in here talking to me. I mean, the point of this is we now have really a whole generation or more of Americans who mostly have not seen any of this. I mean, we're in the middle of a war of sorts now, but it's a very foreign experience. They don't have much of an idea of what it's about, and they don't necessarily think about how gruesome a lot of it is.